Hello, everyone. This is Emperor Haterius, and welcome to episode 2 of At the Emperor's Table. I am here to have a post session discussion about session 16 of my Homebrew Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition campaign. And it definitely was an interesting session. There were some fun moments that I didn't think the players would, um, manage in some of the things that I threw at them. But let's have a little refresher of what's going on with the campaign. And feel free, if anyone wishes to, join the chat. I have uh, text to speech on too, should you wish to hear your questions. I will take any 5th edition or tabletop gaming questions. I'm a dungeon master for over a year plus for these gentlemen in this campaign we're doing, Gaia Aeterna, and it is in a homebrew campaign. So any questions relating to homebrewing or campaign management or dungeon mastering, feel free to ask. I'm going to give a refresher here. I have, let's see, I have several players, a lot of players that I manage in this campaign. That is the kind of campaign I'm running is not a um, intended railroad of any sort. Railroading would mean you've got a linear story that you can diverge from ever so slightly, but it still kind of remains the same way. I try to advertise that my campaign is a free-form sandbox, as the term is coined for games like that. And there are definitely moments where it feels like sometimes the players think that I'm trying to railroad them a certain way. But I assure you that a lot of the things that are happening in session as they continue to go on are based on what the players choose to do. Consequences, as it were, in most cases, or well, I guess consequences can be good or bad. Um, Usually, it's thought of as a bad thing. Consequences. However, there have been some great moments that the players have shared with each other based on decisions they have made. Let me get back to the recap, though. The players, some of you may know them from the videos that I have that I still have yet to continue to update. Unfortunately, I just have not had the time. And on that note, sometime in the future, I'm not going to give plans or anything because life happens. I recently became a full-time employee of the company I work for, so I've got less hours to do my editing and stuff like that. So life happens. Take the opportunities as needed. We have the players' characters. I'll name them by their characters. We have Kildry the Kenku, a birdman, a raven-based birdman. We have Glenn the chameleon folk. He's a lizard man that's of the chameleon variety. We have Bam the mouse folk. He is a tiny mouse that apparently walks around. Of course, the other guys are animals too, for the most part. Beast people. Um, we have Janster, a halfling. Think of halflings as hobbits or smaller people with large feet in terms of like fantasy um, equations, equating races. We have at this moment um, Babel, a tiefling. Tieflings are like devil man, or descendants of someone that made a pact with like a devil or some other outsider horned being, and he is the, you know, person that has taken that bloodline. So he's a man walking around with horns, or at least he tries to look human. We have an elf, I believe a wood elf, by the name of Fenthris. And we have a bunch of NPCs, which we have stacked together a lot. One guy has been with them since the very first session. His name is Aros. He is a human. He turns out to be wanting to stick with the party because of their circumstance in the very beginning of the campaign. And the unfortunate thing is, at least one of the players wants him dead for no reason whatsoever, other than him just not caring about the character. But that will not deter this guy, or at least the GM, the DM, me, from playing this character the way he should be played. They always have the opportunity to say, "Hey, I don't want you in my party," but they've not done so. They just continually passive aggressively say, "I'm going to kill this guy," which is very sad if you think about it. Just having so much hatred for a character for no reason whatsoever. So, other than Aros, the human, human male, there is another human tag along. She is a priestess named Isabel, or Isabel, however you want to say how her name is pronounced. And her dealioso is that she is a tag along in order to assist Janster with his inner demons, essentially his issues he has. So she's a confidant, or at least was intended to be a confidant, and also a supporting healer for the party, as she is a priestess, at least as much as she can be with these ragtag groups of people that are borderline passive aggressively threatening each other and the NPCs that are wanting to help them. So aside from that, that's the main party officially. Bam, Babel, Glenn, Kildree, Janster, Aros, and Isabel. That's the official party. Outside of that, they have a couple squads of mercenaries that are slingers, like stone throwers, javelin throwers, and they have some dragonborns that are following them into this scenario they're in. And what their scenario is, glad that you asked, what their scenario is they found themselves in a city state that is currently plagued by an invading raider force. And this city state is a maritime dominion that is the most powerful navy in this region of the world. And they really have no equals as far as the party knows, until this issue came about where they encountered groups of humans on small ships attacking their navies and their colonies on islands and outskirt areas. And they have been dealing with this for so long, maybe a year or so, where their supplies from the colonies, again, this is a maritime dominion, meaning they are, they've got the hegemony over these colonies that they create, and they get resources from these colonies, including food, other things that they require. They're a big trade empire by sea, or at least big in size in the region. These raiders cut off access to these colonies, and some colonies go dark, as it were, or get out of contact with the main mother city. So these sea raiders, as they are coined by the Navy, get to where they're constantly attacking the Navy and trade vessels and supply vessels and whatnot. And there's essentially battle lines drawn out on the sea as to where waters are contested by raiders, and you could be attacked in any moment once you get to a certain point. It's almost supernatural the way they know that you're coming, because this is a wide sea. This is a seaway, as it's called, the seaways. They're like humongous, like rivers in terms of on the map. It's like gargantuan rivers of ocean water that go in between the continents. It's kind of close if you consider the Atlantic and the Pacific and the Indian and whatnot oceans of our world. All the great seas and oceans. These things are like the Mediterranean, but stretched out farther in terms of how it's perceived on a map. So these these raiders cut off contact with these colonies to the mother city, and the party, because this is the important part, the party um, they find themselves as captives to the city state in an underground, more or less dungeon that is underneath an arena. They find themselves. They make their way out of this dungeon through a puzzle system, a crank that they had to figure out. Um, get to the surface of this arena with this crank elevator that they manually had to do, and find out that they're in arena, and they're like, what's the deal? At this time they had another player who played a paladin dragonborn, and that ties into a lot of stuff in the upcoming stuff I'll talk about. But he eventually left the campaign, unfortunately, and I kept the character around in terms of a supporting cast member, so he has a lot to do with some of the stuff going on in the world. So these characters ask what the deal is. They have these magistrates or whatever look down on them, and they are told that they were being tested to see if they were thralls. And this doesn't really get them at first in these first few sessions. But a thrall is what they meant by it was mentally controlled, like you're a zombie that serves kind of a deal. It's like psychic or psionic as it's termed. And they were testing the intelligence of a thralled individual on these guys because they found them on a ship that the raiders had. The raiders attacked a naval vessel or naval vessels. They don't know for sure. Or I should say the Navy came across a raider vessel and attacked them first, along with some other ships flanking, and destroyed this raider vessel. And on board, the remnants of this raider vessel were the party members shackled up, or at least tied up inside of the vessel itself, unconscious, under like a spell of some sort that kept them asleep. So they were questioning whether or not they were thralls. Just like think of it like put him in a closet, like put away your your robots or whatever, or your I don't know. A good equating would be like, I don't need to wear this today. I'm going to put it in the closet, kind of a deal. That's what their mindset was like. Maybe they were put into a neutral state, a sleep state, until they were needed. As much as you can equate with the technology and the fantasy descriptions here, they were testing them to see if they were thralls. because the raiders, apparently, from what they've gathered yet again, sometimes use thralls to row their ships. These are galley-like ships. They have rowmen. They have oars being manned by many people to get these vessels going in these waters. So that whole deal aside, um, the party is eventually recruited, although some don't really care too much about what's going on in the city state. The city state is being strangled of its resources and food and stuff like that it's getting from the colonies, and they're a maritime dominion. They're traders. They don't really focus too much on farming unless they have to. Um, and this is such a large city that the amount of farming that they have on the mainland with the city itself is not enough to cover everybody, at least in the way that they're consuming it, I should say. There's a lot of there's affluence and stuff like that, amongst the higher classes and stuff like that as a given. And then there's the common man, the common people who just get by. And they have been under this blockade, as it were, this humongous blockade, siege at sea by these raiders, who apparently use thralled individuals. One of the things that makes this more interesting is that at the time, I mentioned a paladin, Shamash, paladin dragonborn. He's a gemstone dragonborn from the MCDM Productions Strongholds and Followers book. And gemstone dragonborns have psionic abilities instead of fire blasts, fire breath, or whatnot. They have, in addition to psionic abilities, instead of a fire breath attack or elemental breath attack, they have gemstone like hardness to their scales, so they have natural armor. And he was a diamond gemstone dragonborn because I allowed it, and they wanted to take advantage of him molting at some point diamonds off of his scales. Again, it was something they wanted to break the system with, and I thought it was funny, but I also gave them limitations and stuff like that. But that aside, he had psionic powers, and it came down to where in the arena, as they found themselves, they had other tests to contend with, and they were going to be tested in combat by this city state that had captured, or at least saved them from a watery grave, to see if they were what their deal was, why they were chosen. These are in fantasy tabletop games. It's like, why are you here at this table? This is your reason for being captured by these raiders, supposedly. There's got to be like a reason why they captured you guys. And in his effort to prove what the party could do, they were going to be put through combat trials. However, they, especially the Dragonborn paladin, didn't want to have anything to do with it. At least he spoke up first. And he more or less said, I don't want to screw around here. I don't need to prove my worth. Let's skip all that crap. You send down the leader of this military organization that suggested this to these leadership of the city-state. You send down him and I'll duel him instead of having the party prove our worth. So what happens is they accept hesitantly, and the leader of this mercenary organization that is more or less in the pocket of these leaders goes to duel him. However, because of a slip in the way I described how this was going down, I told everybody to roll initiative, and then they just joined because they were new players, and I didn't I made it I made it seem like they were part of the combat too, the way I worded things. So they actually attacked him as well, even though it was supposed to be a duel between the two guys. But that aside, it was still a tough fight, at least in terms of like Shamash, the paladin, versus this leader who has he's a pikeman. He had a shield and a pike, and then he had heavy armor. He was the pikeman was just attacking Shamash because that was the intent, and it took him a bit, some a little bit of heavy combat, but it got to a point where Shamash was put into a position where he I think he was either grappled or he grappled him, and then because he wanted to be able to use his abilities, or he wanted to look at all the abilities he could do, allowed him to take an action, as dictated with the abilities he has psionically to do a psionic power. And because of the power that he used in such close proximity to this guy, he more or less like mentally psionically blasted this guy's brain and put him into a vegetative state of psionic enthrallment. This is huge for the party, lore wise. Like, this happens in combat in front of all these magistrates and people that are higher ups sitting in an arena watching them fight because they're judging these guys. Like, what is the deal with this party? So, just checking my chat. What is the deal? What is the deal with the D&D party? Um, they put this leader of this entire mercenary organization that they find out is humongous in terms of influence with the city state, into this vegetative enthrallment of psionic power, the psionic enthrallment, as we coined it. And through the process of story and whatnot, the guys figure out that one of the others, this was post the Paladins player leaving, so he became a support character. One of the other players actually has a psionic spell because he's a multi-class freak, and has a psionic power, or spell, um, and it's supposed to be an unknown thing. They couldn't treat him. The city couldn't treat him. It wasn't a thing that medical, like mundane medical, and the magic that they had access to, which was very little, could treat. A player with a psionic spell makes a very dramatic attempt to knock him out of his psionic stupor by hitting him with another psionic attack. So, this, through some very critical rolls, makes a man who is in a vegetative state, like almost comatose or non-reactive, snap out of it, and he tells of visions that he saw of an island, um, of the large island to the north, and people walking towards the great mountain to the center, and they were under the influence of something similar to what they perceived as the enthrallment, because when you're enthralled, your eyes glow vibrant purple. And the mercenary leader, who we know as Leander now, uh, he had those purple eyes once Shamash struck him with this mental power. But he's out of it now. He talks about these like hordes of people saying different, like speaking in different languages, uh, Dracon or dragon, in different languages, and speaking that as they trudge towards the central mountain on this humongous island that's actually to the north of the continent that this city's on. And then he speaks of a massive dragon that flies overhead, and it's way larger than any fleet that the city has, larger than fleets. This kind of puts the party at a nervous, a tense moment. But skipping all of the other stuff going on, the party agrees eventually through the suggestions of NPCs and this new supporting cast of the paladin that previously was a player, to support the city state in their efforts with the raiders. And the plan they come up with, once they realize and are told by the city state that the colonies on this humongous island that they have established are behind enemy lines, and they haven't heard anything from them. They want these colonies back. They want to figure out what's going on up there beyond raiders causing havoc, and they want to get the islands back. So they set up an expedition. They take 2 weeks. They take 2 weeks in game, plus some time. Like, obviously, this is a lot to deal with logistically. They take 2 weeks to prepare stuff, however their characters would prepare stuff. This is an in-between sessions thing that I do. And I ask them what they do with these days, with the money they have, the items they have, the accessibility they have to this large city. This is the only city on this continent that they know of, because they have not gone anywhere else. They also hear about other Dragonborns that have arrived at the city prior to their arrival as refugees from a whole nation of Dragonborns, which actually the city-state, this maritime dominion, had no idea was there. This is not an ancient city, but it's been here for hundreds of years, and they haven't done much in terms of just accumulating like wealth and putting colonies here and there in the opposite side, while to their west, okay, this is a city-state that's on a northeast of a continent corner on a peninsula, a large peninsula that they establish. This other influences of cultures and stuff like this on this continent, they haven't really said anything to the party about. And Dragonborns were a new thing to these people in the city state. There's an entire nation to the west, to the northwest, past a large like marshland, swamp, and then eventually rainforest, like heavy forest area called the Dankmire. That's one humongous region of just wildness, wilderness. And beyond that, apparently, is this humongous nation state of Dragonborns, militant, as it were. And there are refugees that went to Karhadash, or at least were found by an expedition heading west and brought back to Karhadash. There's a lot of stuff going on to the west. Apparently, there's a demon invasion that proceeded to murder all the Dragonborns and dragons in that nation state. And the survivors, what's left of them, either scattered or are in hiding somewhere in the regions around it. Shamash is part of that nation state. He knows this. He's a support character now. He actually goes to help his people get set up in this area. And part of what he wants to do is he's going to help fight the raiders for this city-state with the Dragonborn survivors, because he's a lord. He's a paladin, a lord paladin. He's a minor noble. He, as a player, no longer is a thing, but as a support cast, I made it where he is going to support his people as one of the few nobles that are left in the refugees and who's in the region, fight the raiders in order to gain the trust and the support of the city-state they are living in hovels around, essentially, in order to set up a new minor state of dragonborn refugees post invasion. So there's a lot going on here. Um, the party, as I said before, in addition to the goading, not goading, but the I hope I hope you find it in your hearts to help us and help the Dragonborns too, and stuff like that from Shamash in a heartfelt letter. But he understands if they don't want to do anything about it, and they can leave at any point. This is a city that they were in for 12 sessions. 12 sessions. This is over the course of a year or so. Um, they have been in this city state. They have all access to ways to leave the city state, despite some grievances of saying, "What are we going to do?" Whatever. It's like it's your choice, and they decide they're going to help the city state by going on an expedition, which they plan for 2 weeks in session or in game character 2 weeks, and they take an exodus via people they gathered together through these times and negotiations and stuff like that. They have the Navy, the citizen Navy, escorting trader vessels that they either bribed their way to get access to or made deals to use while so the Navy can have their warships to go take on the raiders. So what happens is they make this big plan where they get mercenaries. There's an entire league of mercenaries that is camped outside this city, by the way. And they have made this like miniature city along the outer walls of the major city and are essentially building themselves into this city and culture because they are exclusively hired by the city state to work as the land forces of the city state, while their citizen army is very much nil in terms of influence and size compared to these mercenaries that are from all over. So they're called the League of Green, and they wear green cloaks and green tunics and stuff like that around their armors if they wear armor. They're different mercenaries, different races, mainly human, and they're from the eastern city states. And these city states are very Greek inspired. So a lot of the culture that you see going on in this city state, Karthadasht, as it's called, is Punic. It's Greek, and it's got a few different like barbarian things going on, but it's a very classical influenced setting. So they take the League of Green sends several units of men, mercenaries, and the Citizen Army gets involved and sends groups of men on trader vessels so that the Navy have their warships available and free of men that are just going to be in the way. The Navy is going to escort this little trader fleet north to this humongous island where two of the colonies that they have are on and are in a blackout zone. They don't know what's happened to it because it's behind enemy lines. They have the citizen army, they have the mercenaries, they have the party, and they also have a squad of dragonborns who are the most heroic or the ones available of the refugees that are able to fight with exception, like exceptional ability. They had the opportunity to recruit Shamash, the paladin, who they started with, or the other noble of the two nobles that are left of the refugees. And it comes down to a dice roll, and then it really is like, what's the name of this guy? We don't even know this guy. And I came up with the name Adrex, and then I wanted his middle name to be Vaughn, because there's a very Germanic, French, and other like European style influence on these Dragonborns, at least in my world. And I came up with, because there was a wall scroll nearby, we could call him Xeon, as in the enemy faction, quote unquote. of the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise of anime, and it stuck. We called him Adrex von Zeon, and without just blatantly voting for him because Hail Zeon, uh, they did do a dice roll to see whether or not he or Shamash would be the lord that goes along with them with these Dragonborns. And Bam, because he's one of the major influences of Mobile Suit Gundam in our group, alongside, or one of the major fans. He's a bard, so he adds an inspiration die. After they roll, get odds or evens. Evens gets Shamash, odds gets Adrex. Bam added a bardic inspiration die to that roll for him to use, and he said sure. And they rolled the bardic inspiration and added another three, so it became an odd number, just so they can have the excuse of why they wanted to bring along a dude that had Xeon in his name. So that was pretty funny. So they have this unknown noble dragonborn with a squad of varying different types of dragonborns that are of different classes as like volunteers because they want to be able to help their people earn the right to live in or around Kart Hadasht as a refugee minor city state. So they have the Dragonborns, the main party, several groups of mercenaries, several groups of citizen army official soldiers from the city state, and you have the navy. Three admirals have their own battle flotillas, or uh, what's the term? Not air group, because that's air, obviously, but fleet groups. They have their own fleet groups, and these admirals. You have one admiral per fleet group. Two admirals go to the west because this island has a western approach, of course, because it's an island. And one admiral goes to the eastern approach to this line that has been drawn pretty much across from one continent opposing the city state to the continent that the city state's on, dividing the island in half as well. As far as they know, with their intel, which is very little despite having naval presence, the land intelligence thing is not so great because they're on an island and the tech isn't as great as people would think it'd be. So they don't know what the forces are on the island. They make the plan with the party to make an outpost on the southern tip of the island, because why would they make a colony right beside another major city state? It would just be contesting the waters that fishermen and trade do. There's no point in it. So they had colonies on the opposite side of the island, this major island with a humongous mountain in the center and highlands in the center. Two of them, one is named Matya and the other one's Drapana. And they want to make an outpost on the southern tip of this island because it's straight from Kart Hadasht, and it's the closest point on the island that would be to Kart Hadasht. And they want to make a port there, a pier set, so they can have reinforcements come in better for whatever land war awaits them, if they have any at all. So they land. Prior to that, the Navy splits off to go to the west because that's the hugest contested area because it's the closest to Kart Hadasht. And the east is the further northeast contested waters, which actually heads towards the city states, which they have their own fleets and whatnot, and they've been fighting off the raiders too. So the most contested is the west. The Navy split off from escorting to go attack the raiders after a day or so to cause a distraction and cause whatever raiders would be on the land that have access to ships go to sea and fight the Navy, while the party and whoever military forces they choose to bring with them, whichever military forces they choose to bring with them, go north on the island and see what's up with the colonies and see like if they're able to take it back or if it's just completely destroyed. Just assess what's going on with the colonies. That was their plan. They find out when they first set up shop. They land on the island. They start setting up. They more or less the ships were a one-way trip. They start breaking down the ships to make fortifications with the lumber and the timbers and stuff like that the ships are made of, plus all the resources they brought along other ships. But it's not enough, to have ships left over and whatnot. So they dismantle their ships, make them into like improvised structures and improvised battlement of like a palisade, I believe is the term, wooden walls with entrenchment. This to start making like a tent outpost, minor settlement. They don't have a way back now, and they're going to receive another set of reinforcements within the next day or so. They find out through shenanigans with Kildry, who has a companion familiar raven, three-eyed raven, named Pluck, that he uses to use like an UAV, a reconnaissance bird, but not in combat, at least in terms of like combative ability. Bam, the mouse folk, as tiny as he is, the mouse, gets on the bird and goes flying over the region to the north of this outpost while the outpost is still working quite tirelessly and quickly to get up some defenses. And Bam, while on the bird, spots a patrol. The patrol is a what they can assume to be the raiders per descriptions. And he brings back this news of this patrol that's actually heading southwards. Like, not like they've spotted anyone, but just like they're patrolling the coastline of this island. And they're heading south towards where this outpost is set up. Because they don't want to be seen, and this is going on evening and night turns on them quickly while they're debating this. They don't have a lot of people that... or I should say, they have people that use dark vision, and they suggest go ambush this patrol with dark vision, try to capture who they can, and they do so. They take the Dragonborns because they have dark vision. All but like a couple characters stay behind because they don't want to have torches lit. They want to be able to travel in the night. So characters with dark vision go out, which is most of the party because they're bestial, except for Kildry, Glenn, and the humans. And they go ambush this patrol of these tribal-looking raiders, wearing headdresses, wearing very little armor, like just cloth, loincloths. Sometimes they're wearing like padded chest piece, and they're carrying like bronze weaponry, like short sword, and some of them have bows. They approach these guys. And more or less because of miscommunication amongst the party or just somebody being too anxious to get into battle, they try to cast sleep on these raiders. And these raiders notice that something was attempted to be casted on them, like some effect of magical capacity, while the plan was one person, specifically Babel, holds a torch out after he lights it and stands while the rest of the party flanks in the darkness, presumably to these humans who can't see because they have torches. And he acts as bait, and then the people pincer attack him. The rest of the ambush squad pincer attacks them. One of the party members, Janster, uses a sleep spell to try to knock out the head guy, who is just, he notices Babel standing there waving his arms and yelling at him, and they just march forward. They're not really in a rush, as if they're going to approach him. And then somebody tries, specifically Janster, tries to cast an enchantment-based sleep spell on this guy while he's marching forward to Babel, and he stops and he notices magic was cast or whatever, and they get kind of defensive. And I don't know fully if it kicks off here, but I know essentially at some point it gets to where they just say screw it, just attack them, and the whole group attacks this patrol, and it gets to where they kill like most of these guys, and some of them are just so heavily injured uh, they can't fight anymore, and one person tries to run away while they have some I believe it's half elven skirmishers with them who are using javelins, I believe, and they run off after the guy that ran off while the rest of the party captures two people, I believe, two or three that are heavily injured. And they bring them back to camp in the dark, parade them back as prisoners. And what happens next is they're met with like such hatred as they return and whatnot. People are yelling at them, and it's late at night. People get up at like those who were still awake, turning in. They get up and they go to like watch this procession, uh, bring back these prisoners, these people that are so hated because they've been like such an issue for a year or more to these people. Presumably, they've killed plenty of naval personnel. They might have killed colonists and whatnot on this island, but there's such a hatred in that moment, and they go to turn these guys into the leadership who's there. Speaking of which, the leader of the mercenaries in this operation, who's on the island at this outpost with them, is Leander the Strategos, as they're termed. Strategos Leander is the guy that was under the influence of the psionic enthrallment that they saved through some great rolls. He resumes being the leader of this faction of the League of Green. They turn to him and another strategos of the Citizen Army, the leader of the Citizen Army. They turn these prisoners into them, and the leadership gets some of the soldiers and tells them to go lash them up to a post, or take care of them. And that was the end of a session. The next session after that was the party spending their time that night doing long rests, preparing whatever they need to, because in the morning they were going to march north to Matya, the colony that is the furthest northwest of the island. And they wake, get prepared and whatnot, and then they have a scene of the prisoners were shackled up, lashed to logs or timber that were out in the elements all night. It had been a downpour of rain since the end of the ambush, and they had been out in the rain all night. They realize this once they go to see what information was gathered from the prisoners overnight. They find that one of the prisoners is dead. Another one is just barely clinging to life. And they see another character who, this is a player character. They find out he's very much an interrogator and had been managing the prisoners the entire night, to the extent where they didn't hear anything coming from these guys, but they definitely had some major wounds on their bodies. At least enough wounding that would make a man yell, but there were no sounds that night, especially since this outpost is so close together. That was put into question as to the abilities of this interrogator. So, one of these raiders, barely clinging to life, they find out these guys don't speak common. They don't speak common tongue. Using mental spell abilities or spell-like abilities, some of the players use, say, if the target of this spell-like ability or whatever spell understands any language that you know, such and such, it alters it where they understand you, and I believe it's either that they understand them or it's a vice versa thing. Um, but they show no signs of like understanding what's going on, other than obviously they're a prisoner. Um, and it gets like very mysterious with like how these people are, because they're very tribal looking. Um, they they look like they're warlike people. They're definitely look like they work on the sea based on their tans, based on their physique. They're not like anything uh, like the supreme human or whatever. They seem like they're used to it, and it gets to a point where the leadership calls together a ceremony to show, like, with the military forces that are going to be going on an operation in a couple hours, to have a public execution of the last guy. So Fenthris, the person that was interrogating, stands by, waiting for the order, while the party and the military and whoever else, workers, stop to witness this. They have this jarring speech of like the two leaders have these speeches going on, because they can't get anything out of this guy. They go ahead and make the grand display of this execution, so it raises morale. They have this jarring speech in front of the military forces and everyone that's there, and then they give the signal to Fenthris, and Fenthris whispers something in his ear, the prisoner, and he slices the dude's throat, while at the same time doing like some like instantaneous like neck break too, in some fast fashion. The character dies. The raider dies. And Janster, one of the things he can do, because he's a ghostwise halfling and his background is haunted, I believe, he sees ghosts. So what happens next is this raider gives up the ghost. Eventually, he sees the ghostly visage, whatever, of this raider come out of the body, and then after a moment, you see a bright glow to his chest, and then like he's reacting to it, and it just keeps getting brighter and brighter, and then eventually the ghost explodes and dissipates. So that's major info there, at least experienced by Janster, and I believe he tells the party that in future discussion once he gets done fainting, which he does, witnessing that, because he's a very troubled soul. The party sets out with, after much debate on what they can do. One moment, guys. All right, short. I gotta cut it quick here, unfortunately. Um, Essentially, what happens is the party debates on what can be, essentially, who's gonna go where, with squads and whatnot. They decide they're going to take two groups of skirmishers, peltists and stone slingers, and the dragonborns, and they're going to head north to Matya, which is the northwestern uh, colony. And they also find out that Glenn, the chameleon folk, who's an artificer, has an arcane a thunder cannon or arcane rifle, as I call it. He's a sniper, um, because he's a magic tech wizard apparently. Uh, he has a flying broom that he got through a curio, so he wants to be a scout and whatever. So that's he's offering that because he's trying to be a stealthy character, but he's also trying to be a frontline scout, which doesn't work in my opinion. But it is what it is in terms of like utility that he has available to use. So the party in this session, the post session that I'm finally getting to here, but unfortunately I got to cut it short, uh, goes to find themselves on the outskirts after heading out for some time of this city, and they see a procession of what they think are villagers and raiders having a procession to the east, northeast, and the settlers that they think that they are wearing tattered clothing and they're carrying excavation tools. But they're just marching along. They're not shackled. They're not being goaded by the raiders who are marching alongside them as escorts without their weapons out. And another thing that they notice, because they rolled so well, was that their eyes are purple, which parallels uh, the psionic enthrallment that Strategos Leander was under. He had purple eyes. He also came from his stupor when they saved him, uh, making reference to a vision where people had purple eyes and marching towards the mountain, presumably on the island that these guys are currently on. And these settlers in real time are proceeding, at least like as if it's their own free will, to northeastern part of the island, to the north of the mountain, into the highlands there. So they start to continue to piece together, like, this is psionic stuff. This is like they're probably thralls, like we've dealt with and whatever. Long story short, there's a lot of debate there. Something appears in the middle of this huge gathering of people, and it appears to be a being that is pure fire, humanoid fire, and people think it's a fire elemental, but it doesn't look like any that they've seen in the past or know of. And after some time of realizing this thing just appeared in the middle of them without any signs, there's no casters nearby based on checks. There's nothing going on with the procession below. They're in the highlands, looking downward on this procession that's in the plains in the distance. No activity there. This being just appears in the middle of them, and after some time of trying to speak to it and it being non-responsive, when they look at it, they do a wisdom save. And I'm going to say it here. It was a wisdom save DC 30. And if you didn't do a nat 20 or like some ridiculous roll that you had bonuses for out the wazoo, you didn't succeed. Most of the players, including the NPCs and whatnot, failed. One player did not look at the figure because he was actually doing something else, looking for casters around him. So he was the only one. Everyone that failed was stunned, which means they're incapacitated and they can't move. They speak falteringly if they speak at all, and they have advantage on being attacked by somebody in melee and whatnot because they're just incapacitated. They're standing there incapacitated. This goes on for some time. They try to do wisdom saves, constitution saves. Fenthris, the monkish character, centers himself with his key and breaks himself out of that with his willpower and like honing his key and his spiritual self. Breaks out of the stupor, whatnot, and goes to try to help the others. He also casts darkness on this thing. This thing is bright. It is blinding fire humanoid. And like it's like looking at the sun. These people are stuck, incapacitated, and all they can do is look at this thing or try to divert their eyes as best they can, but they can't move. So he casts darkness on this thing. It makes it pitch black in a circle, a sphere, and they are still within the sphere of darkness while this thing is blacked out with darkness. Um, and the majority of the session was dealing with this. Eventually, it gets to the point through checks and saves again, because again I gotta keep this. I gotta get going here shortly. Pressing business, unfortunately. The deal with this is that darkness extended this encounter for what I wanted it to be way longer than it should have been. While it was very clever, though, it was very clever. The encounter itself was supposed to end shorter based on events, but it got to a point where people were able to save with natural 20s and whatnot on like continuous saves that they were trying to get out of it because they didn't want to sit there and be incapacitated. And it wasn't convenient for me to enact what I had next. So it got to the point where people were being like dragging each other blindly, whoever they could find, while feeling around in the darkness, the spell in darkness, out of this darkness and dragging them to safety outside of it, away from this thing. It gets to a point where a Dragonborn walks up from the south and says, "What the hell is going on here?" Like in Draconic. And there's only 2 players in the party that know Draconic. One of the players actually had to leave. He couldn't be reacting, and more or less, I feel terrible. This is a discussion, Q&A for my session. I feel terrible because we started early for his sake. And he had to leave because he had work in the morning earlier than normally. He didn't get to do anything because he was stunned. And I feel really bad about that. And that's part of the gamble you take as a GM, DM, setting up these scenarios where people are helpless and whatnot. So I'll have to make it up to him somehow in the next coming, like the coming sessions. That aside, a Dragonborn NPC comes up. He's questioned by the people that are not stunned. Like, what's going on? Or you have anything to do with this? And he says, no, but I can end it. And he walks into the darkness sphere with a large sword, like a bastard sword, that he pulls off his back. And presumably that the players have could see, the characters could see. He walks into the center, slashes his sword down on this being, and then it disperses. And they downcast, they disperse, they dispel the darkness that was cast around it, and they find out it was gone. The party, question this guy, what his deal is, whatever, and he tells them he's from another group of refugees, and of the Dragonborns. He's from a group, like the group that split off prior to them coming to Karhadasht. And there's a lot more to say on this, but more or less it gets to a point where the party wants to stick around because their job is to scout this place out and then get new orders. They're not supposed to do any fighting or whatnot. The procession did not notice them. They move off to the north, and then the party decides to leave the skirmishers, the 2 squads of skirmishers there, and then head to follow the procession, see what they're going to dig up. It gets to the point where they get noticed, they go hiding, and then while they're in hiding, they take a long rest. But the party members that don't really need a long rest, an elf that needs 4 hours of meditation, and Babel, who doesn't need to sleep because of a eldritch invocation, and he didn't use any spells, they go off to investigate what the dig site is. They sneak up eventually, and they see them digging up a highland set of mounds like hillsides and whatnot. And what is revealed is a stone face, at least the corner of one, that is revealed as clumps of dirt fall down in this large excavation site, presumably by enthralled individuals. And as I end this up, I also ended up the session with the eye opens, reacting to being revealed. That's it, guys. Unfortunately, I have to leave here. I got some pressing business to attend to. If you guys have any questions concerning D&D, 5th edition, tabletop gaming, homebrew campaign stuff, like how to deal with players, how to deal with like setting up your campaign stuff, please feel free to comment on my video. Please feel free to ask me in other videos that you see. But for now, I've been Emperor Haterius, and this has been live Q&A Dungeons and Dragons. Unfortunately, I didn't get any Q&A in today. It's just recap, which is not terrible. At some point, I'll get these videos made where you can catch up with the campaign and you guys can actually understand what's going on without me rambling. So, thanks again for watching. This has been Emperor Haterius. Hope you guys have a good day. I will hopefully be streaming Mass Effect sometime soon. Have a good one.